And I all please. If the clerk would please.
Mr. Gordon, Ms. Hayes, Ms. Vasquez Luna, Mr. Stewart.
Good. Second.
Need that. Yeah. Okay. Again, just primary evacuation route, we'll use the couple wooden doors in the back. We will not take the elevator. We'll take the stairs. Up front, where you enter. The circle driveway out there. Just as a quick reminder, as it relates to just generally safety and security, if we do have an act. Right. Want to do so. That's not safety moment, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Rich. The next item is to the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion? All right, is there a second? All right, there's a motion and a second. Did anybody have any comments or discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the agenda is adopted. Well, minutes previously circulated to you. All right, I'm not hearing or seeing any.
Move for approval, Madam Chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, there's a motion.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the meeting minutes are adopted. With that, welcome to our June board meeting. We had an audit committee meeting this week, which was actually very interesting. Not to say that audits aren't generally interesting, but it was an exciting audit committee meeting. There was a lively conversation, and it is a public meeting for what it's worth. So all members are welcome, as is the public, to listen. We got an update on the schedule. Some field work has already started, and we'll have further meetings in the fall when they're concluded. VRE Finance Committee will meet just after our general session today. I will share to have committee start by 11 if hopefully that's realistic, but that's the goal we're shooting for. Just people need to plan accordingly. But yeah, please feel free to say whether you are formally on that committee or not. It will be an exciting led by our chair. With that, the CEO.
If I go to Action by the FRA with the modifications that we made. So we continue to advance that. On-time performance, still struggling out there. As you can see, the last couple of months, we were hovering. Now we're hovering at the 8%. As I bring to you every month, just a breakdown here. I think this one does a little bit better job. In terms of talk about estimate. So, nonetheless, I do, and a lot of this is still coming in the afternoons, predominantly out of Washington Union Station. We have a meeting next week with some folks from Amtrak. Hope to get a more formal update on the completion. I mentioned this before, of track 22. Once that track 22 gets opened back up for us, it does provide another platform, another track on the lower level at Union Station. I don't want to say that it's eliminate the congestion issues, but it'll definitely be in our favor. We'll see that before the summer ends. So hopefully that kind of reverses the trend. Frankly, a lot of train traffic. We've been discussing and or doing the past couple of years about advancing infrastructure projects and stuff like that. That'll only go to help this. So, but if you're like me, I'm a little impatient. Done now. So. I understand it. Of course, our trains have to originate at a Washington Union terminal. At Washington. Several things. And, one of what and we prove that, but we also asked there was connected.
congestion will they relieve? Because I look at that chart and I see Amtrak trains, and we make all this discussion about separating freight and passenger. But Amtrak trains will stay on the same tracks as us. So what I'd love to understand is which of the projects, stuff at Union Station, fixing various infrastructure issues. What about third track, fourth track? What about Long Bridge? How will they each address the varying types of congestion we have? Because I understand the freight train part, the 226 bubble up there. And the other potential.
We can do that, but just to make sure the expectations are set, someone to do, you have to do a couple, like the new Long Bridge,
Right.
for example. If you go construct a new Long Bridge, well, in order to make that effective, you've got to do fourth track, 4 tracks on the south and 4 tracks on the north. So it all kind of works together. We'll come up with something.
Thank you.
Like I said, most importantly, all I can give you right now is that when track 22 comes in service, I'm told that will relieve a lot of this potential congestion.
I think to use your word, I think what I see here, there was an opportunity while we have delays to sell people on what they're about to experience. You think this is bad, we agree, but the only way to fix it is to go through what will be a even more frustrating period. It sort of incentivizes people to be on board for what's about to happen to service, which is that it will decline a little bit in areas as we build these projects. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Farrington.
So the way I'm trying to communicate that to people is that there are choking points there, like places where a disturbance has cascading effects, right? So the Union Station makes it affects the service of Amtrak trains, and then in turn they affect our service. And so there is a cascading thing, and the way I try to communicate that to advocates who want, service reliability, is to say, we need to address them first, and this will be like major surgery in the middle of the working system, right? So brace for several years. Now, the experience that I have from similar problems in other places, smaller, is that we need to be very diligent in communicating at the beginning. So what's the time of the expected timeline, but then as we progress, communicate progress, say this is where we are, and if we are not there, this is why we are not there, etc., etc. This takes an extra effort. Plus, and most important, at all times there has to be a parallel positive message that says we are working for your service. Pardon our dust. We are not good at it. I'm saying that, I mean, VRE better than many others. But it's like putting orange cones out and thinking that people will have general understanding. They perceive it as an annoyance, as a problem. And if you don't thank them for their, patience, and don't expect that this is really to improve the place, that we are working for you, they will never be friendly companions of this. I mean, they're not going to be entirely friendly ever, but friendlier than completely, hold the ground.
I'll just say on the communication, so we're sort of adapted a mentality that we need to over communicate this.
Yeah.
Frankly, we have to over communicate. I want to be in a position where people are like, stop, we already got that, we know that,
We are being the VRE of the 21st century.
Exactly.
Yes, this
So,
kind of.
so we are even changing our approach as well.
Ms. Bombi.
So this is really great conversation. You haven't even got through the first 3 minutes of your report. So for me, because I'm such a visual person, what I envision, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is some kind of a map. And in addition to communicating everything that says, here's where we are, And then there are all these little additional add-ons, which I see you smiling, so that they see it as we're building it, but then see what the grand poobah is gonna look like at the very end.
Absolutely.
So.
All right. Next slide.
Okay,
Um,
great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Ridership. Still a good, month of May was good. We have one fewer service day compared to April, and of course in May, we start dealing with not only Memorial Day, school gets out, so we anticipate ridership to kind of flatten a little bit. But again, if you compare May to January, which is a benchmark I always kind of use, you know, we've doubled total ridership on a month-to-month basis since January. I do want to just take a moment though, and I just and I think everybody gets this, but I think it's worth saying it out loud. You know, to basically go from that level of ridership in January or even before that to now, I gotta, you know, my hat's off to our staff. The communications people, passenger support. I mean, if you really think about it, and a lot of these are new riders. These are new riders. So I just, you know, again, a shout out to, you know, to Chris Henry and his staff, Joe over there. Actually everybody, because it's been an all hands effort. And, you know, it's actually kind of refreshing, if you will. We do have some new riders out there and they're giving us some really good feedback, okay? That we can, that we need to leverage. So I just wanted to go on that tangent for a second, but and not just the staff sitting in the room, but I know a lot of them are listening. So and then accordingly, average daily ridership still you know, double from what we were seeing in January. Events, the Manassas Rail Festival, first Saturday in June, every year. Believe this was the 31st, and there's only been I've done it 16 years now, and there's only been one of those years during COVID that we did not have the Manassas Rail Festival. I got to tell you, it's still always a great event. The weather, I think the forecast was misleading, if you will, because it was much nicer day than the forecast led. But appreciate always the collaboration we have with the city of Manassas, the HMI folks, you know, city police, everybody. It's a good event, and I will say now it's a safe event. We've overcome a lot of issues out there. So how about a couple of new staff members? We've got Miss Monroe and Miss McKenzie in the back. I'm going to ask you both to stand up and wave. Now, up to this point, they have been told that to keep their speeches about 5 or 6 minutes. I'm here to tell you, you don't have to give a speech. I just want to introduce you to the operations board. Both have joined in the last month. Ms. McKenzie is in our customer support group as a communication specialist, and Ms. Monroe is in our accounting and finance. So just want to welcome on behalf of this group, welcome you guys to the VRE. Thank you. Just want to give you a heads up. We are going to post this afternoon our full customer service or customer survey that we conducted in last day of April, I think it was. Just want to give you a little glimpse here. My intention is Leslie will send you an email and send you the link. Okay, we'll start there. My intention is to bring this back as like an information item or something like that. I want to drill down because there's some very specific target areas and share with you our improvement processes, if you will. We never look at these, even if we're up there, in the 90% range, mid 90s, we always can find something to improve on. So I just, again, wanted to set that up. That's why you're gonna get the email after the meeting. And then we'll make that available to the public as well, the full survey. And that's my report, Madam Chair.
All right. Any other questions or comments for Rich on this report? Ms. Walker.
Just a question on ridership. I mean, my sense is it's kind of plateaued. Just in glancing at the weekly reports, is that your?
Yes, and I think we pretty much anticipated that, for the summer. Our business, if you look at our business compared to like Amtrak, our business will flatten out where Amtrak's business
In some.
in the summertime. So
My sense was though, we had started to plateau in the early spring also. Is that, there was like a return to work bump and now it's.
I think that we have plateaued, but I think there's also something sort of soothing that it wasn't a spike and then a back down. Everybody kind of jumped and went back and then went back home again. So I think this is becoming a reliable number, that 11K sort of number. Because I know we hit 13 one week, but I think 11 is probably what we would hope to see in the fall again after it dips in the summer.
Yep.
Mr. Kynhomes.
Just mentioning that congestion on I-395 hasn't plateaued yet, so
Yeah.
congestion is actually increasing. It would be interesting to, I know that correlations can be read in different ways, but it would be interesting to juxtapose that from time to time.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes, just going back to the survey, Rich, I think, first of all, 89% is great. The thing that was interesting to me though was the 77%. That was very interesting to me because I know that there's been a focus from you and your team to communicate more and to put information out there more. So can you just speak to that for a minute?
just there, and again, that's why I wanted to bring it back and dive into, this is, what I'm showing you here is just a summary.
Mhm.
And there's many elements, down to, timeliness, quality of social media posts or,
Mhm.
platform announcements and all that kind of stuff. So I want to break that out because there is some areas for improvement in there, as well as the other categories,
But I just want
but yeah, that's.
to acknowledge, I know that the team has had a focus on making sure that communication with the community has improved and we've seen it. So that was interesting.
Over communicate.
Yes, yes.
All right,
Okay.
we will move, but yeah, we're gonna move on then to public comment. VRE accepts public comments both in person and electronically via the VRE website. Members of the public wishing to make public comments have 3 minutes and should state their full name and the jurisdiction they live in. Written comments submitted before 8 a.m. this morning will be forwarded to the members of the board and attached to the official minutes. Do we have any members of the public here this morning who would like to address the board? I don't see anyone. Madam Clerk, do we have any electronically submitted comments?
Madam Chair, I forwarded one public comment to the board this morning.
I appreciate that, and everybody had a chance to see that, and I'll just, I was chatting with Rich before the meeting, just my hope and goal that the question we got was keyed towards some significant work we've all been discussing, and what I hope maybe is that VRE can put together sort of a standard comms package that would go out attached to any sort of specific answer to the extent people are asking about projects that we are well aware of. So that the person gets an answer, but then, and here's a link to our, our package on this project, because there's a lot of materials available, that are, and rather than reinventing the wheel each time, we can give a specific answer, but then direct people to sort of the homepage for Long Bridge project or for Alexandria Fourth Track. With that, we're going to move on to consent items. We have a consent agenda this month. We don't always have one, and I was going to ask if there were any objections or need to pull any item in particular for discussion. Otherwise, I'd like to propose we address these in a slate on one vote. So if anybody doesn't want to pull anything, I'm going to quickly read through those 4 consent items and we'll deal with them in one vote. Item 9A is authorization to issue a request for proposals for safety and security consulting services. 9B is authorization to issue an invitation for bids for modernization of the Woodbridge Station parking garage elevator. 9C is authorization to issue a request for proposals for construction management services for the Crossroads Maintenance and Storage Facility, Administrative and Employee Welfare Building, and Employee Parking Lot Project. Somebody needs a good acronym for that. And then 9D is the authorization to issue an invitation for bids for track maintenance at the Seminary Yard Midday Storage Replacement Facility. Do I have a motion to approve those 4 consent items?
So moved. Second.
Ms. Collins with the motion, Ms. Bailey with the second. Any conversation on those items? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the consent agenda is passed. Our first action item is item 10A, authorization to issue a general planning consulting services task order for National Transit Database and Asset Management Reporting. Rich, could you introduce the item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As stated, we're seeking authorization for this task order with STV in the amount stated in the resolution plus a contingency. I'll just state that, yes, this is the 11th one. We've been doing this, ever since we implemented our transit asset management program, which is a requirement of FTA in order to receive our federal formula funds, specifically for 5337 funds. And so the task order, it usually ranges in time-wise, it'll usually go anywhere from 12 to 15 months. So you've seen these before. Just want to point out this year, we do have to have complete assessments done at our facilities. So there's additional money in there. That's an independent third-party assessment. We don't do those internally, so there's extra work there. And then we're transitioning also a tool that we use, particularly for those types of assessments, and any other way of communicating to various teams, items that may need to be addressed at stations. We're updating that to be more of a GIS based system. So there's some good work in here. So that's my summary, Madam Chair.
Any questions for Rich on this item? All right, I will take a motion to approve action item 10A.
A second.
All right, motion by Ms. Bailey, second by Ms. Bonke. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, item 10A passes. Item 10B is an authorization to execute a new contract for new locomotive air compressors. Rich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we're seeking authorization to execute a contract with Power Rail Distribution for amount stated in the resolution plus a contingency. I don't know how to make this. I mean, this is a cool item. It's
Naturally cool.
It's naturally cool. We say that anybody can get a train going, but it's really the professionals that can get it stopped. And we need air to stop a train, okay? And just this all is driven from our life cycle maintenance program that the board adopted a decade or better. Unique here is that we previously overhauled these air compressors. Even the first ones were remanufactured. We can only do that a couple of times, so we had to go out and purchase new this time. So that's my summary, Madam Chair.
Any,
Motion to approve.
thank you, there's a second. All right, motion by Ms. Bonke, second by Ms. Holmes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, item 10C, recommend commission approval of the purchase and sale agreement for the Spotsylvania County VRE station parking lot. Does this have any history, Rich?
Thank you.
It's a tad.
This has some history. Yeah, it's unfortunate Supervisor Hayes isn't here.
I know.
Nonetheless, I'll make this, and again, we'll answer any questions and stuff, but this is a recommendation to the commissions to acquire the parking lot at Spotsylvania Station. Some of you have already been involved in this over time. Well, we finally got here, okay? And I think as time went on, our objective was maybe we could get this done by the 5th anniversary of opening the station. Time has gone on. If this gets recommended, the commission subsequently approve it, we will have obtained the objective of having the property conveyed to the commissions before the 10th anniversary of opening the station. So I just want to kind of put that into perspective for you. It is, and what I do want to point out, it is at no cost to the commissions. Okay, so to say nothing in life is free, well, here we go. Also want to just emphasize is we've been maintaining this parking lot since it was open, so there's no real incremental cost. What this does do though for us is that it sort of locks, speaking of transit asset management plan, it does lock us in, you know, it does having ownership or having some long-term requirement to maintain the lot does free up 5337 funds for us to use on this lot. That's my summary message.
No, I appreciate that, and thanks for the history, and for getting us here. I do think this essentially codifies a lot of what's already in place. Any other questions or conversation on this item?
Super excited.
All right, is that a motion, Ms. Helms?
It is, I will move, yes.
Second.
All right, so there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, item 10C is approved. Item 10D, recommend approval and authorize submission of a VRE project to NVTA for FY 2026, 2031 6-year funding consideration. Mr. Dunlap.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This too will not cost you anything. It's simply an application, if recommended. Just specifically, the project that we've identified here is the VRE Broad Run Lead. Some of us refer to it as a third track. Just want to remind you that part of the transaction with the between the Commonwealth and Norfolk Southern, in that transaction, the Commonwealth acquired right of way, and then part of our funding agreement with the Commonwealth, or specifically VPRA, has that property identified as being conveyed over to VRE. But that's not free. We have to pay for that one. And so priority project for us would be to go get, you know, funding, or at least potentially through NVTA, and construct that third track or the lead. Another area for congestion mitigation, and there is there is a small drop in our access fees once we commission that line. So that's my summary, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Rich. Are there other questions or comments on this item? I'm not hearing any, and understand. Oh, I'm sorry.
Quick comment in support of this, being able to fully control the line all the way from Broad Run and I have to say Mother May I to the wonderful folks in Norfolk Southern. This is important problem.
And I just add, I'm sure, thank you for that. And that, you know, as y'all note in the item, this is part of what our next item, part of System Plan 2050. So lining up funding that requires no match, that serves our longer vision is, you know, these are all connected pieces. So I hope ultimately we choose to support this submission to NVTA. Ms. Bailey.
Yeah, just, we love progress. Thanks, Mike, for that perspective. And so move forward.
Is there a second? Second. All right, thank you. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, item 9D passes. We have arrived for item 10E, recommend adoption of the VRE System Plan 2050 by the commissions. Mr. Dalton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We did prepare about 60 slides. Prepare about 60 slides. And but we're going to do it a little different here. It's going to hand it out to you in the form of a placemat.
8.5. Now,
This is something that we thought maybe you could take away with you. There are just some nice little fun facts, bullet points, all that type of stuff. It's again, starting that, or another way of communicating or over communicating.
Was you on the VRE train?
What's that?
Was you on the train? It looks like you got like some
My backpack isn't quite big enough to fit me.
Is that what it's-
17.
Does this have anything to do with the flat tire you had this morning?
No, it did not.
Okay.
Thanks.
Just asking. Yes, the one thing I do wanna, and we're prepared to, have whatever level of discussion. I just, I felt the need to talk a little bit. We've talked about this before, but just process, okay? The intent here is to adopt a plan or a vision, actually. You've heard us say this, it's not a budget. You're not approving any projects or anything like that. And then what I visualize here is that at least once a year and likely through the normal budget process, that'll be a good time to bring you back like updated ridership forecasts, updated, potential infrastructure costs and all those types of things. Some of the major elements or anything that you want us to bring back. So the point of me saying that is we don't intend to put this on a shelf somewhere and not revisit it. We're going to do maintenance on the plan and the program as we go. So I just wanted to emphasize that point there. And then if Madam Chair, if you have anything else, and like I said, Nick overcame his obstacle this morning. Good job.
The tire can be patched.
So Nick's here, and of course we have a big staff member that's topic. So that's my summary, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that. And I feel like I'm back at like IHOP or Friendly's,
Yeah.
my favorite sort of menu placemat. But no, I appreciate this. I'll have this with me before my next city council meeting on Tuesday. I would encourage all of you to do the same. I don't know how you report out to your respective boards and but I think one thing I wanted to bring back to this board was the conversation had at NVTC, which is that body was very interested in knowing sort of how are we building these models? What's the data we were relying on, our population estimates, our growth estimates. And so we've had a pretty active dialogue at NVTC about those models, about how they're related obviously to our individual jurisdictional plans for growth and for development. And to the extent that it's using feedback that COG puts in, that our respective regional bodies put in, it's relying on all that. I think we wanted to give some assurances that this board had poked at that a bit and expressing that back here, that we had that conversation there. And then I think the reason why I raised in the last item is something I expressed at the NVTC level is why this is important as a vision for 2050 is it does allow VRE to start working backwards on the kinds of grants and projects and funding sources they'll need to be seeking now to position future work. That if we don't have a vision enunciated 10, 15, 20 years out, transaction is a 6-year plan. And if you haven't even proposed it, you can't later apply for it as I'm layman's explaining their process. So just sharing some of that dialogue here for those of you that don't serve on NPTC and that was what they were very interested in. And with that, I'll sort of open it up broadly if there are other questions about what we're doing today or what the 2050 plan entails. Mr. McLaughlin, you look pregnant with comments.
We have extras up here too.
Question, and I'm not sure if Rich or someone else wants to handle it. Just the capital cost required for the 2050 service scenario. The 3.3 billion is above and beyond the 5 billion cap transfer around Virginia phase 1 and phase 2 capital program.
Yes. Yeah, we didn't include that in, or it's basically, and I think we've discussed this before. That's just, sort of our look. If it, and I don't, Nick, maybe correct me where, I know there's like phase 3, phase 4 plans out there. I think we were looking at basically what it would look like after phase 2 projects are done. And if we were to expand VRE service, then these are some infrastructure improvements that we see that could be done. And I just mentioned phase 3 and phase 4 because I know at VPRA, moving some projects around and stuff like that. So it was just a glance, a look at that, how it actually gets built out and when. Is subject to, I guess, letting the calendar in part do its job, let time go on. Is that?
Yes, thank you.
Dr. Yang?
Yeah, in terms of something I've been thinking about, and I don't see it on any of the conversations that we've had about technology in terms of the VRE by 2050, things may change. And have we taken that into consideration, like speed and the fact that the tracks are not ours? How do you balance how far fast we want to go versus where Amtrak and anybody else is with that same track?
Just, yeah, and I think the beauty of the way that we're approaching this update, as I said previously, is that we're gonna continue to update plans, right? So I'll just address speed, right? At this time, there's no plan to increase speed out on the Fredericksburg line. I don't think so on the Manassas line as well. Simply because, and that was looked at, DC to RDA, I believe. It was looked at trying to increase speeds. And, to increase speeds, you gotta, it changes curvature of the track, cant deficiency. It's a huge investment. So we're assuming right now the speed doesn't change, using your example. If that changes a couple of years from now, if there's some technology, if something advances out there, then that gives us an opportunity to dive right back into the plan and update our assumptions.
And piggyback on that is the fact that, you hear about ridership and increasing ridership. When you increase ridership, of course, that's at the speed issue that you're gonna have more people going on. So when you say you're not addressing speed, I'm thinking, I'm gonna be late for work. Because, you have to pause and wait a little longer for everybody to get on that train. So how do you handle that in the future?
Well, if I catch your question correctly, I mean,
Speed is gonna still be a factor.
it's at the end of the day, and I'll just say this broadly, at the end of the day, folks don't necessarily care about the speed of the train, they care about the schedule,
Accuracy and.
the schedule and the reliability of the schedule.
But if it takes them a longer time to get to work.
Well, and this plan actually contemplates, the service enhancements that we contemplated here will include, additional limited stop trains, for those that our most popular train right now is train 300 on the Fredericksburg line. We load up 800 people a day on a 1,000-seat train, but they leave Spotsylvania at 4:57 in the morning, right? So, but it's a limited stop. It gets them to DC in like an hour. So service planning wise, we'll introduce some service like that. But it's really the reliability piece. And the reliability piece comes from the infrastructure improvements, capacity expansions, et cetera.
Thank you.
Mr. Karentas?
So when I talk with my colleagues about this, about 2050 here, besides, putting it in parallel to the other efforts that are going to the same day, I always try to make sure that people understand. For example, we don't account, and correct me if I'm wrong, we don't account about the increase in cost and affordability. Actually, the alternative is to drive, and the alternative has only in the last 10 years the alternative has been shooting up in cost for individual households like 60-70%, something like that, with HIP and all this, and also the insurance costs for cars that is far higher, and the maintenance costs for cars is far higher. So if there is one thing that I think that should at least be communicated to the commissions, etc., is that this here is not only one model that we add to the mix, but this is one model that aspires to be dominant in preference at some point, and that we ask for everybody's attention to that when they make other decisions like land use decisions and commercial and economic development decisions, to take that into account. Because later we'll go to the Commonwealth and also to Congress, looking to my right, and making a different argument for infrastructure investments in this region in the United States in general. So I think that this is actually a modest and conservative estimate. And if to follow Ms. Bagley's menu comparison, I would take 51 million, 188,000 vehicle miles that voted any kind. This would be my first choice, right? And then the personal vehicle cost savings, and then 64,000 hours of delay avoided. So that has a huge cost. And actually, the interesting news here is that we know for sure that these costs will be higher, while ours will be trailing.
Yeah.
And that's an enormous advantage that we have. So thank you for all the work. I'm for sure ready to vote for it.
Thank you, Mr. Karantanis. Mr. McLaughlin?
To Dr. Young's point, and Rich's point, not only will reliability be helped, but time will be saved by a lot of the station projects. For instance, Alexandria, my office is up in Alexandria every day. It's the platform is so low in train, so it takes a long time to board and onboard people. And Crystal City and L'Enfant, moving those two from one platform edge to two platform edges, meaning you can have Amtrak and VRE, or even two VRE trains going different directions, boarding at the same time. Otherwise, right now at Alexandria, you have a lot of different trains waiting. Having two platform edges and the improvements that VRE and Richard have planned, L'Enfant, Crystal City, those things are going to make a huge improvement. There's Amtrak fleet improvements coming. They're going to help with time as well and decongest Union Station, because they're not going to have to put the diesel train on when they're going south or take it off when they're going north. So that's going to help a lot. Now those trains are coming in about 2 to 3 years. And also those trains are going to get up and go a little quicker at the stations too. Right now, if you watch Amtrak, it's kind of old school. You have to drop the stairs, and it takes too long. The newer trains are going to be much quicker. So there's a lot more improvements coming. They're going to help with reliability, and while the speed, and while there are times we'll work with CSX when we're doing third track projects like in Stafford County and other places. If we can save 30 seconds or so by improving signaling or straightening something without taking right of way, we'll do that. But Rich is right, for the most part, the right of way is not always a straight line with railroads. But I just want to point out there will be a lot of time improvements by current capital projects ongoing and the future ones listed here, and also Amtrak improvements as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and Malcolm's popping up into you next. That just to that point, I had an opportunity this week to sort of experience the future, sort of what it's like to move about our region. I took an Amtrak train from Alexandria to Baltimore, experienced the 20-minute changeover at Union Station. I wasn't so much concerned about the speed of the train, but the reliability. Was I going to get on when I planned to, and was I going to arrive when I planned to? And so eliminating that 20-minute pause at Union Station, the train doesn't go any faster, but I'm going to get there 20 minutes earlier. Same thing on the return. I took a MARC train back to Union Station. It didn't go very fast, but it was right on time. I mean, like to the minute, not to do a shout out to, but to a partner. But so I think faster is always better, but reliability, especially in a long journey like that, where the drive probably would have been about the same, an hour plus to get me from Alexandria to Baltimore. And so I appreciate your point about technology speeding us up, but I think just like with bus service, it's really more about the reliability, your willingness to opt in.
So when I say technology and I mentioned speed was just one of the items, because there's so many. So, and then combined is always, there's more than just reliability and speed of and I don't know what the word is in English, it's skipping my mind right now, but in my mind, it's pleasure. So whatever it is, the convenience, the reliability, the speed, all of that is experience, that's the word I was looking for, the experience that you're giving a rider. So all of those have all those elements in it that you need to look at one at a time. When you look at this is all on paper and it's money and it's cost, but you can't factor it because you can't see it. You know, it's not tangible, so taking that into consideration when you're planning for the future. How you're gonna map that out, I don't know, but those are the things that I was thinking. Cause all that travel I've done and, you know, looking out the window or being in a quiet car, all of that stuff for years, it is the experience. It's also, you know, how are you gonna feel when you step off? And so, technology with the bullet train when I'm in Japan or all of those Asian countries, it's also something that is enjoyable because, you know, we go like tip, 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 the March train. All of that. So just the convenience of everything together. I was thinking about.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Ms. Bomke?
So just two things I have a question about. On page 21 of the 47, there's a reference to the relocation of the Brook Station to Courthouse Road. Can somebody share with me where it's being relocated to?
It's not.
Oh,
That, in that section there, it just talks about, I mean, and Nick can get into the technical details of it, but as part of the process that we went through, we did, there were some things that we identified, you kind of take a fresh look at this then.
Right.
The system and hey, is our stations in the right location and stuff like that. So we did look at that. You'll see in there, potentially adding, stations in the Van Dorn area, both on the Fredericksburg line, similar to that. We identified that there's a potential there. We didn't do anything with it.
Okay.
And if that's something that, there needs to be more analysis and stuff.
Right.
We just share it in the document because we did look at that going through the, not the exercise, but the analysis of, hey,
it's not a bad idea.
I'm not saying, anyway, we just didn't take the analysis much further.
I got you.
We
Okay.
can pick it up and go though.
Yeah, I wanted to understand that because that's not a bad idea. My other question was about the the weekend ridership. And please correct me if I'm misread this, but I don't see where it's really being incorporated into the 2030 plan, but it's in the 2050. And, I know we all were informed at our last meeting, while some of us had expectations that we would have weekend service sooner rather than later. I think we were all properly informed that it won't be until 2030. So is there a reason that we didn't put that in here and that we left it in the 2050?
I believe there is some projections in there for 2030. Nick, you wanna jump on?
Yeah, certainly. Thank
Yeah.
Ms. Pompey, yeah, so on page 27, if you're referring to the summary document, there is a figure, I think it's figure 12, and that is the 2030 Saturday and Sunday weekend ridership estimate.
Okay,
We present a baseline, which is simply the
Yeah.
3 round trips, which is included in the current budget, and then we include the full 26 round trips.
okay, all right, well, that's good that it's in there, because there are some other references, and I saw it more referenced in 2050. Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question about, first of all, Nick, love it. On the front page where the 3 million is located on the capital cost, I'm looking at the listing there, and I just need a clear understanding in terms, I know it's 2050, but on the back page, I'm looking at some of the lines are not listed. And future lines I'm talking about. And so I'm really selfishly referring to Potomac Shores and Quantico. Could you just kind of enlighten me as to why, or is it 2 different things? On the front page here, I'm looking, because we know those are future lines that's coming, like Potomac Shores.
Stations, you mean?
Yeah, stations.
Oh, okay, yeah, so we've made the assumption, obviously, that Potomac Shores would be on the ground and open for service prior to the 2030, the first horizon year, so that's not included in the capital cost estimate. because it's never been on our books
Right,
because that project is being funded by the developer.
okay.
So that's why you wouldn't see Potomac
You wouldn't
Forest.
see it here.
Yeah,
Just making sure I'm in line with you
Yeah.
because it is a service and I want to make
Yeah.
sure how does that look in terms of the future? Okay,
yeah.
I'm good. Mr. Storr.
I don't recall in our review of this, we've been reviewing this for what, 6 or 9 months. I mean, it's been a good while on it, and I really appreciate the dialogue we've had. And I think one of the key things that's changed, and probably for all of us, is the fact that we're seeing numbers, at least present day numbers, that give us more confidence in the 2030 numbers. And, definitely a sense that 2050 isn't either unrealistic. And I think those are the core foundational items of the plan here. I don't recall a conversation about the other foundational parts of VRE, which is that we had a 50-50 revenue split between what passengers paid and what the systems subsidized or supported. Has that been part of this consideration, and how has that been looked at in relation to funding and the financial process?
So, yes, and Mark, if you want to jump in, but I'll just summarize. Yes, we do have a 50% fair recovery ratio. Yeah, fair recovery ratio. I think I recall discussions, and I believe we've had it in some PowerPoint presentations and stuff. It gets much more difficult as we go to maintain that.
And that's just operational subsidy,
Yeah,
that's not
that's just
capital at all.
yeah,
No
that's not
capital
capital,
dollars
that's
or
just-
no capital, sinking funds or anything other those fair recovery would go into.
Sure. But I just want to make sure I'm answering your question correctly, is if we've baked in, we've at this level of financial analysis, we've looked at, overall cost, right? For both capital and operating. I'm not sure we've actually drilled down to exactly what the fair recovery ratio is going to be at certain levels of ridership. I don't think we've broken it down to that point. Mark shaking his head.
That assumption is built into this, is that we've not changed the board's, because I think it's a board position, right? That it's 50-50, even though we've not been there anywhere close to there the last many years, so.
Yeah, we have, in doing the modeling for the planning, we have not imposed that constraint. We have said, here's the level of service that we want to add, here's what we think that'll cost, here's what we think that will generate in terms of ridership. But we haven't constrained it to say that it has to meet that 50%, no. And I think Rich is right. As you expand into some of these more sort of regional rail type of reverse commute, late night, weekends, I think those are less likely. As you add those, it's going to be more challenging to continue to meet that ratio.
Because the passenger levels will be inadequate to support why would you, I guess, not criticize, I'm just wanting to understand, why would you believe that would be less likely the case?
I mean, I think generally, with any transit, not just with commuter rail, as you expand your service, you're likely expanding into less productive either times of day or geographies or directions of travel. You sort of assume that your planners have done a good job up to that point and are putting the service in its most productive places. Not to say that adding new service is unproductive. It is just probably less productive on a, riders per train or riders per mile basis.
So part of what I hear from that, and not for today, but just to keep it in mind as we go along, is theoretically, if we want to maintain that 50-50 split, we're going to have to recover a higher percentage. We have to recover a higher percentage of passenger payments for our core lines than we are the outliers. I mean, the later at nights or earlier in the mornings or whatever that might be.
Yeah.
To get, if we want to again continue the 50% ratio for that.
And I think one other sort of tension that we need to address is, we have depended in the past a lot on, the federal government employees who tend to be relatively price sensitive. And if we're trying to expand sort of beyond that group, we may need to look at, the fair policy.
Thank you.
To this point, I mean, I think the traditional customer was somebody getting on the train to make money. We are now marketing to people getting on the train to go spend money. I mean, so it's a different mindset. I mean, it just like, if you're getting on the train as a commuter, it's worth it to you because you're going to earn a living. There's a significant return on that trip. If we're marketing it to someone to come up from Spotsylvania or to go to a Nats game, their calculus, to Mark's point about elasticity, is very different. And that's the same. So though I wasn't here, part of probably this 50% mindset was who was the target audience. I doubt 30 years ago they were calculating CO2, emissions avoided. And so philosophically, to your point, I think the next time we discuss the viability, the necessity of the 50-50 break even, or what are we serving and why? And do we view transit as a public good that we are investing in, or, as an individual commuter, I'm going to pay money to go make money, investment? And so it's a little bit of a shift in who are we, why do we exist, and how do we fund ourselves accordingly, which I think SJ28 to some extent is discussing statewide, DMV moves is discussing regionally. And so I appreciate your point. We can't just ignore that cooked into our core documents is this 50-50 split. But I think for me, so as long as I'm a part of the board, I don't necessarily want the conversation to be, how do we adjust our fares and pricing to honor indefinitely the 50-50 split? But at some point, do we have a philosophical conversation about, is that the right requirement moving forward if it's a public good that we are investing in, and that we establish better funding streams for that aren't so jurisdictionally dependent or aren't, grant dependent? So I think it's really important point you've raised to remind the room, that we have this 50-50 premise. But I think as we expand beyond the commuter model, I assume that premise was based in part on that commuter model and what people were ready and able to pay. If anybody else who was with us there, or has other sort of insight onto that foundational thinking, but for me, that's, I think, has to be part of our philosophical engagement on this moving forward.
I totally, just as a comment, and Dan, thank you so much for bringing it forward. I totally agree with what you're saying, Madam Chair, but I think with that, it's a paradigm shift in how we are governing and how we are providing the service. And I think from that perspective, it's how we educate the public too, because their mindset is probably still back in the day or right now, instead of futuristic in terms of what their needs are. So I think having that philosophical discussion today as we transition is so critical with this board and how we're looking at things, because it's not the old school way in terms of where we're moving to in the future. And if we don't have those discussions now, then we are behind the 8 ball of this. So I think we just need to focus and have, verbally have those kinds of discussions in terms of strategic planning.
And I mean, I mentioned that train ride I took on Tuesday. My calculus was my 2 train tickets were less or about the cost of what parking I expected to pay for in Baltimore. So I paid $19 on the way up on Amtrak, and I think $9 on the way back on the back to Union Station. So I wasn't thinking about it, from what am my money going to make, what am I going to spend, but like the cost of my time behind the wheel and the parking on the other end. So just different calculus that our riders are going to be making. I think commuters are going to remain our core, our base, our 70, 80, 90% of our ridership for years to come. But in 2050, in the context of this conversation, I think that's why the point is so important.
Yes.
I think it's incredibly complex, and I think you touched on pieces. I don't think we've really touched on some other pieces, which is there's some lines that are going to get more heavily subsidized and other lines, and what's the balance? What's the equity, if you will, between what jurisdictions are paying? We already heard that before with some of the jurisdictions and concerns about how they fund that. So I think we probably need to take a deeper dive in that, particularly since we're at 20%, maybe a little bit higher now, but we were at 20% before the bump up in ridership. So I think we need to take a look at that and understand what particularly the marginal cost of adding one more train. There's fixed costs that I agree that, theoretically, we're gonna subsidize those, but the marginal cost of additional train or changing the schedule, I think that should be tied into ridership at some level and the demand at some level, and that's the conversation I'd like to have.
Is this a year that we do fairs? Don't we?
See, James just
We're gonna
left the
talk
room
about that.
Oh.
particularly before, but
Yeah, Mark, is
We're
it?
gonna talk
on
about
the
that
agenda.
at 11.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, so let us get to that. Sorry.
Exciting, Mark.
Ms. Bonner.
Exciting.
So I just want to say, I think and this 2050 plan that was put together by Nick and his team is really phenomenal. But for me, the two most important graphs in here is figure 6, the cumulative capital need on page 28 of 47, and figure 7. And I think we need to constantly have those in our minds at every finance meeting, whenever you're talking about anything that has to do with finances, because we have massive gaps there. And how are we gonna meet those gaps? And on a semi-annual or annual basis, we need to have this in our plan. It kind of reminds me of our utilities department. For 10 years. They had so much cash in the bank and they were stashing that up to build the biggest reservoir that we'll ever have in Stafford County, which we needed, and it will serve us for many years. But they didn't do any rate increases. And so now we're doing all the rate increases. So they were just looking at the cash, and this was back in the day, so things were very different. And I'm not being critical of anyone, but you have to constantly have something like this in the forefront as you're making these financial decisions. Because these two graphs tell the whole story of our financial situation. So I don't know whose idea it was to put this in here, but it's very good. Thank you.
And I know everyone knows this, but just keeping that dollar figure changes, that value of that dollar changes, and keeping that in mind too as we go forward.
Right, well, appreciate the dialogue, and I think maybe we flagged for the VRE staff some conversational topics for future meetings. With that, it is an action item, so I'd entertain a motion.
Move for approval.
Okay, is there a second? All right, Mr. Cantonis, so we have a motion by Ms. Bailey, second by Mr. Cantonis. Any further discussion? No, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the 2050 plan is adopted. Congrats to everybody involved in that. Moving on to the spending authority report.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sorry. Mr. Dodd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As required, here's the spending authority report. Glad to answer any questions you may have.
Did anyone have questions on the spending authority report?
No.
Okay, spend wisely, please. Okay, so, just as a little bit of housekeeping real quick. So we're gonna go into closed session and potentially in a moment, Ms. Bailey will have that motion. Just a few items as you'll hear in the motion. What I'm gonna ask is, we'll do this, we will go into closed session. If we could take the shortest of breaks, meaning like if you need to use the facilities or grab a drink of water, I'm not gonna like set an amount of time, just please do that, come back so we can go through. And then finance will pick up, we'll return to open session and then go into the finance committee meeting. With that, Ms. Bailey.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And pursuant to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, sections 2.2-3711 A1, 6, and 29 of the Code of Virginia, I move that the VRE Operations Board convene a closed meeting for the purpose of discussing a personal matter involving a candidate for appointment by the commissions, and B, personal matters involving the performance of VRE Chief Executive Officer, and C, the investment of public funds where competition and bargaining involved, where, if made public initially, the financial interests of the commissions would be adversely affected, and discussing the terms and scope of the contract involving the expenditure of public funds where discussion is an open session would adversely affect the bargaining position and negotiating strategy of the commissions.
Second,
Got a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes, Ms. Bagley,
Aye.
Ms. Bailey,
Aye.
Mr. Stork.
Aye.
Ms. Bomke,
aye.
Ms. Holmes,
Aye.
Round two.
Mr. Karen Tonis, Ms. Luna,
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Aye.
Ms. Mensing, Mr. Walkinshaw,
Aye.
and Dr. Young.
I agree.
And Madam Chair, you have a unanimous passage.
Okay, we're gonna move into closed session, and I'll see you all in 3 or 4 minutes.
Chair, I will have to recuse myself on one item.
Okay, does that need to happen, Steve? And if,
I would,
will we just note at the end of the closed session?
You're not gonna participate in one part of it.
yeah,
Yeah, that's fine. I think putting it on the record.
when I certify, I will certify with the explicit exception of the item that I recused.
That's fine, yep.
I need John.
We're down to our report tonight.
I mean, neither.
You never have. Point to. With this, because this is, you know, this is.
Yeah, like, they were testing. My wife tested the guy.
For years. I was like, all newbies. All right, thank you, everybody, for returning. Ms. Bailey.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The VRE Operations Board certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge and with no individual member dissenting at the just concluded closed sessions. Number one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meetings requirements under the Freedom of Information Act were discussed. And number two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed session was convened were heard, discussed, and considered.
All right,
Second.
second, Mr. Karantonis.
Yeah.
Has an additional comment.
So, Madam Chair, this is just to state and to confirm that I've not participated in the part of the conversation that the deliberation that had to do with personnel matter, but in everything else. So I'm not dissenting that the closed session was about the items that were announced at the initial motion. I just recused myself from one item.
Appreciate that, Mr. Karantonis. With that, there's a motion and a second. If clerk could call the roll.
Yes, Ms. Bagley,
Aye.
Ms. Bailey,
Aye.
Mr. Stork,
Aye.
Ms. Bomke,
Aye.
Ms. Holmes,
Aye.
Mr. Karen Tonis, Ms. Vasquez Luna, Mr. McLaughlin,
Aye.
Ms. Mensing,
Aye.
Mr. Walkinshaw.
Aye.
And Dr. Young.
I agree.
And Madam Chair, that passes unanimously.
All right, before we enter into operations board members' time, I have the distinct displeasure, I guess, to make an announcement to the board and to all those watching that Mr. Dalton, our CEO, has shared with us that he will be retiring in October from VRE. We can't begin in this context to speak to the full breadth and scope of his career with VRE, which ranges, I believe, 16 years.
In a day or two.
It's been a few days. I'll just take a moment to say that I think it's fitting that we pass the 2050 plan today as we're getting this announcement, because Mr. Dalton was all over the 2050 plan and has worked tirelessly over the years to position us to adopt that plan and to have that vision. So it's a nice moment, I hope. We will certainly address this at greater lengths in the months ahead, but congratulations to Rich on what is an immense opportunity ahead for you. And I just want to give you an opportunity to speak to everybody.
Oh, I appreciate that. Just, no, it's it's time. And so, and it may not ever be a good time, but it's time, so. appreciate
A man of few words, ladies and gentlemen.
it. Well, it's the 11 o'clock.
I know, so,
Take up some time here.
with that, I mean, again, thank you to Rich. We will have a much longer dialogue. We will be standing up a process. We will be standing up a committee. I'll ask any board member to express to me their interest in serving on a potential search committee. But we really appreciate Rich for his 16 years of service to the organization. What we expect to be another fruitful months ahead as we prepare. And with that, I will hand it over to Ms. Bailey.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I am, Rich, I am elated to work with you. You are a scholar and a gentleman. And I so appreciate as a part of this august group, your service to not just to us, but to this community. And so I thank you. To my colleagues, to the fathers, happy belated Father's Day. This has been, we're in for a great summer. And Madam Chair, thank you for your leadership and how you lead us in every way to make sure that we are quote unquote family and making big decisions for our community. So that's all I got.
Thank you. And I think it was the first month or two I was on the VRE board that we hired Rich, and I really didn't know what was going on and learned a lot. And mostly the process, I wasn't part of the personnel committee, but I inserted myself because I thought I needed to really be more engaged. And I recognized with all the boards that we serve on, how important the membership is in any board you serve on. And at the time, I really wasn't sure. I didn't really know Rich, really wasn't sure what all to expect. But he is absolutely far exceeded my expectations in terms of the leadership, your style, the way you engage us. And just, I think you have done an amazing job, very supportive, even though we have, I know, huge challenges, but major challenges we've already gotten to. You think about the last 5 years alone, I think for any organization has totally stretched us, and particularly to conclude that with the purchase of Norfolk Southern areas, you see all the things coming together, and I recognize that your leadership and your knowledge of the rail industry and your relationship with people have been a huge part of that. So looking forward to working with you the next few months, but also wanted to acknowledge the amazing and wonderful work that I think you've already done. Thank you.
Rich, thank you. I was sad to hear the news, but I know that this is an around the clock job and you have just given an incredible service to VRE and to our region. So thank you. And it's a well-earned retirement. Sad to hear it.
Rich, as I said before, this can be summarized as in, this sucks. But I know that it's always a bittersweet moment, and I will, besides the obvious gratitude for an appreciation for the service to this board, to the organization, to the staff of this organization, to everybody who's right now, making sure that the trains run on time and safely, the passengers, the riders of VRE, and the entire region, which VRE is an essential part of its transportation infrastructure. Besides this gratitude, I will refrain from further comments until your roasting session, because you will deserve one, a full one. So thank you for that. I look forward, as the chair has pointed out, to some intense and fruitful months of collaboration for your final day. Thank you indeed. Thank you.
Sad to hear of the retirement. I wasn't here when you were hired, but Preston was, and I remember him telling me, you're really gonna like this guy. He's good for VRE, he's gonna do some great things, and he was not wrong. It's been a pleasure working with you.
So 8 years ago, we came on board with Rich. We've done a lot of good together. You were our go-to person before you were even CEO. I remember coming to see you about some service plans that we were hatching with CSX and some crazy ideas to buy some rail lines and did a lot of work in a short period of time to transform VRE. And for, I think some people do not even know that before our agreement with CSX, there was no certainty that CSX would continue that agreement forever. So getting Rich's buy-in and VRE's buy-in back in 2019 was huge. And you were at that
Yeah.
first press conference with CEO of Norfolk Southern, CEO of Amtrak, the governor. You're at the second press conference with the governor, CEO of Amtrak, CEO of CSX, and you've been involved with obviously the Norfolk Southern deal. They actually approached you first. And we worked well together to make the Manassas line happen as well. So I'm crestfallen. I'm happy for you though. You know that. So best of luck, and I want your personal phone number because we're gonna need to tap that great brain of yours even after you leave. And whoever's gonna follow you has some
Big shoes.
tough shoes
Yeah.
to follow.
Well, I will just say, you've got a great staff here, so.
Yeah.
I'll eulogize you in October.
Always the professional, and again, I'll save my remarks for later, but thank you. You've been awesome to work with. I'll save some remarks for October, but as a newer member to the board, it's always comforting to me to have somebody who is so competent at the head, be it a lawyer, be it the CEO. It's, so it has been, I describe you to other people in Fredericksburg as like Rich Dalton, who's all things trains, and that is a huge comfort. And it has been a pleasure to work with you, and I wish you the best. It is big news.
Congratulations to you and your wife. Really happy for you that you get to do this in your time. I believe you have accomplished some. I've been here only for a few months, and you have accomplished so much. It will, the work. I think I will continue to learn how much you were doing, and also are turning to. So, congratulations, and for the last train that we had, thank you for working together, and Manassas has so much coming, and you've been part of that, so I truly appreciate it.
Yes, again, thank you, Steve, and thank you, Rich, both of you, and congratulations to both of you. As I said before, happy for you and your family at this stage. It's all about taking care of yourself and also enjoying life. Also, when you see me, sometimes you see me, sometimes you don't. It's because for these past 4 years, I've been alternate and then just filling in this year. So when you don't see me, it's not that I don't want to be here. It's just the way how things happen to be for Stafford and for the writers and everything. So I appreciate learning everything. It was never a time that I didn't call Rich or met with him that he would look me straight in the eye, and it didn't matter how dumb the question was. He would just look me straight in the eye and gave me the answers that I needed. So I appreciate that, especially because sometimes I didn't know what I needed to know. So I appreciate you taking time and spend with me to give me that information. So thank you.
So I think that everybody here in the room has really done a very nice job summarizing how much you will be missed, Rich. I enjoyed working with you when I was chair. You are a phenomenal individual, but I think what I love the most about you is you have cultivated great relationships and really instilled such a teamwork spirit at VRE. And I think your staff appreciates that a lot, and it speaks a lot for the organization, and that comes from you as the leader at the top. And I do, as a former, my dad worked for DuPont, so, and their #1 plan was safety. So I love your safety issues at the beginning. I think that's, and it carries throughout the entire organization. So I'll have additional comments, but I just want to say thank you. I'm a little not surprised, but I think it's great that you can go off and enjoy other things in life. And Good luck to you.
I'm pleased that Meg ended on safety, because if it hadn't come up,
Yes.
that's where I was gonna end us, which if nothing else, would Rich, his legacy would be a legacy of safety. I was recently leading a group bike ride, and I found myself saying, okay, here's where we're starting. If you get lost, this is where you go. Like, this is the front. And somebody else on the ride went, you just did like a safety moment, right? And I thought, okay, but I think that's a legacy to be very proud of. Is the role that you will have placed in making sure everybody is as safe as they can be with the organization. So thank you very much. With that, we're adjourned, and finance will start in 5 minutes. Thank you.
It's on a basic card.
I'm not in there.
So.
I will.
You never know what's gonna happen.
You'll be able to.
We actually have, there's a class, anyway, it's like a, right near our office. And so you're
Hey,
good.
folks, we're gonna bring this finance committee meeting to order.
So they look this way.
Thank you, everybody. Mark, we're gonna go ahead. I'm just turn it to you and you, Mark sent out a presentation. Hopefully everybody at least knows that it's got it, if they haven't had a chance to look at it. He's gonna walk us through it. And the purpose of this really is to, I know Mark's gonna cover this in just a second, but it doesn't hurt to probably say it twice. The purpose of this is really to anticipate questions that we know are going to come up as part of our next budget, and to try to get ahead of some of those conversations by having some preliminary ones now about subsidies and passenger, charges and fees and so forth. So this is to just have that broader conversation now, and then use this to try to focus more of the answers or questions that we need to have as part of that deeper discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sword. That is absolutely what part one of the agenda is, and the more that we can talk about these things now and next month at the operations board meeting, where we'll be coming to you with our normal sort of like key budget issues for next year, as we do every year. I can't believe we're kicking the budget process off again already. But the more that we can sort of get these things raised up ahead of time, that way we can bring you a preliminary budget in September that is very close to what you're gonna wanna see in December, and not spend months, wrangling sort of back and forth. The second part of our agenda today, and we can spend as much or as little time on this as you want, is talking about the needs analysis that we're gonna be presenting to the SJ28 group a little later in the year. What is happening, there's a meeting of this subcommittee next week. They're really gonna be delving into the kind of the left hand of what is the menu of revenue options that are out there. And then once that is done, we have to the technical working group, the committee, everybody, we have to marry those up against what are the needs that WMATA, VRE, OmniRide, all the Northern Virginia transit providers have, and how do we match those up and try to make those work? And that will become the basis of the recommendation coming out of the committee. What we'll talk about here is very preliminary. We're still refining these numbers, but I want to at least give you guys a chance to look at it. So, two big policy decisions, that we always have going into the budget. What do we want to do with passenger fares, and what do we want as far as the jurisdictional contribution? So if you recall, we had a memo as part of last year's budget process that I think really did a nice job laying out sort of the history of a number of different things all the way back to 2009. So this is drawn out of that same data from that memo. As far as the passengers, if you'll recall, for FY26, which is the year that we are unbelievably just about to head into, we have no change in what we're charging the passengers. For last year, or really the year that we're just ending right now, we instituted an increase of 5%. And then, of course, for the few years before that, we made an explicit choice, given the pandemic, given the desire to try to encourage ridership to return as much as possible. We didn't make any changes. And then pre-pandemic, as we were in that sort of nice steady state of alternating with an increase to the passengers and an increase to the jurisdictions sort of every other year, usually in the range of 3 to 4%. And so to give you that sort of historical thing, because these things, they add up cumulatively over the years, right? If you miss a couple years, it can be hard to get it back. So if you go back to 2009, we've increased our fares by about 32%. The federal transit subsidy, which many of our riders get, has gone up a little more than that over the period, about 41%. And overall inflation, again, if you measure it by the CPI, has gone up 46%. So that period, especially during the pandemic where we didn't raise fares, has caused us to sort of drop down, has caused us to lose some purchasing power. We talked a little bit during the meeting about, again, there's a little bit of tension about raising the fares versus how do we want to attract other riders. But I would say from a staff perspective, I have been going into this FY 27 process kind of anticipating that we will probably have a fare increase. I don't wanna tell you guys what to tell me, but, you know, that, again, doing it kind of every other year does seem to be workable from VRE's perspective, and, you know, the riders tend to, you know, they may grumble a little bit, but they understand. So, I have been sort of assuming that we would want to do one. If that is a road that we want to go down, the earlier that we can make that call, you know, we have to do public hearings and outreach and all of that kind of stuff. So the earlier that we can have the board tell us, yes, that is what we want to do, we can begin to kick that process off. So I will pause there and let you guys.
All right, so I'll just say, when I looked at the 2050 plan on those figures 6 and 7, and then you look at this, we have to increase fares without a shadow of a doubt. And you know that I'm not into increasing anything. So
When Nick says.
for me to say this, and I think that the 5% is valid. I mean, look at the CPI over that time period. We haven't kept up. So for me, it's kind of a no-brainer.
So this is my quick reaction. I learned the hard way, by the way, that the transportation system, it's not the fare increase that matters, but how we tariff, right? If we, you know, expect people to more buy, for example, more tickets, I mean, you know, period tickets like monthly or so. So there are, for example, many metropolitan transportation systems that work where the individual fare is really very expensive. But the moment that you buy like 3 or 4, it becomes a lot more. So because it's here, it's both things. It's the percentage of cost coverage and, you know, fare box recovery and also the cash flow. For me, a very important metric here is, I don't know why I would choose 2009. I would always go with round decades, like 2010.
Oh, sure, we could do that, sure.
Because this gives me an idea of how, you know, our basic operation costs are evolving, whether we are behind. There we are.
Wait till the next slide, I'll show you.
Okay. So I will just fasten my seatbelt.
No.
I know that my life vest is under my seat. So I understand that right now it's very difficult, especially, and then the demographics and the equity argument, because a fare for somebody who was, you know, who is well off, especially for computer systems, is a different thing than for somebody who is less well off. And so we need to balance that. Unfortunately, I learned also the hard way that there is not a single lever to bring back ridership. Different constituencies and riderships need different levers, and they will react to different incentives, right? Some will be really focused on level of service, reliability, etc., which is an expensive thing to uphold. Others will react more to a low fare. Others will react more to a more attractive longer. So it is a good thing that we start this conversation now, so that we can. My gut feeling, like in almost everything, is that we have at least to follow CPI here. But CPI doesn't say nothing about the contribution of fares to our cost recovery here. And I align with Dan here that we need to literally look very carefully at this and also put some goals against which we can at least benchmark, if not measure, benchmark us, right?
Can I make a couple comments on
No,
that?
please, yeah. And otherwise, just people, if you have something you want to say, just raise your hand, but then if nobody else is speaking, then please feel free to speak.
We had, as riders have returned in this calendar year, we have absolutely seen a shift from people buying single rides and 10 trips to monthlies. So that translation is absolutely happening. And I think one thing that I could bring back to you all, leave aside the question of, is it a 3% increase, a 5% increase, whatever. I sort of take for granted the relationship between the base fare and the 10 trip and the monthly. We could easily come back and just refresh everyone on that. I believe off the top of my head, you know, that the monthly is like a 25 or 28% discount versus if you were to buy an equivalent number of like one way tickets. So we could just bring that back and if we wanted to dig into that a little bit more, you know, if we're all agreed, we need to at least keep up with the CPI, maybe even a little bit more, but do we want to look at that relationship between the one ride 10 trip and the monthly? That's one thing that I could bring back. The last point I would make is we are at the point now with the federal transit benefit that only the very longest monthly passes, like if you're going from Spotsylvania all the way downtown, are not covered by the monthly benefit. Almost anyone, if they're buying a monthly pass and they get the full value of the transit benefit, does not have to pay anything out of pocket. That didn't used to be the case. It used to be, you know, maybe anybody past Quantico to the south, if they wanted a monthly pass, would have had to dig into their own pocket a little bit on top of the federal transit benefit. But as we have not always kept up, that is covering more and more.
Well, that's
Good for those who enjoy that.
For those who get it, but
Not great for us, though, so, I mean, great for us because we keep the riders, so that's sure that at this point, I mean, even the little marginal additional will persuade them to take the car to go downtown to work, right?
Right.
So we still are missing on this extra.
Yeah. I share that. I think we obviously support increases, but I think we need to have a broader conversation about where we're going and how do we get to whatever this new level of ongoing passenger rail support, passenger support to versus jurisdictional subsidy. I think we need to have a richer conversation about that. It may not take place this coming year, but I think because we're going to be looking at increases and we'll likely be doing increases, I'm of a mind that I think we need to get closer to 50%, whether or not we are there or not. I think that's the conversation about it's the balance and continuing to grow it versus, but it's also what we can do on the jurisdiction side. So I think it's a richer conversation, but maybe we don't do it all this year. But I absolutely want us to take a deeper look at that, and that may fit in with increasing fares 2 or 3 years in a row, smaller increases to do that versus a larger increase now, and then you wait 2 years and do another. I think those are part of the conversations I want to see us having to get a sense of whether or not that's the best way to maintain our passengers. At the same time, not leave subsidy dollars on the table if we can afford it, not to. I mean, that's obviously in our interest, and then recognize that I don't know about others, but for Fairfax County, we're very focused. Our budgets have gotten a lot tighter because of the whole office market, et cetera, and it's something that's significant that we're going to want to minimize.
So Dan, if I can just ask you this, when you think of a substantial increase and then tailor it down, what is that in your mind?
I don't know. I mean, I only know is that at the moment, part of what I want to see is VRE board from its inception, I believe, made that the ratio, essentially 50%, passenger fare supported, 50% jurisdictional subsidy. That was what they've had. I would want to see what that means if we were to go back to that, and how would you go back to it, given, that we're pretty far away. I know it's changed, and I don't even know what the change is now, because I know as of the budget before we had the increase, really the renewal of the ridership, we were at 20% or so, and the renewal of the ridership maybe gets us closer to 40%. I don't know what those numbers are, so I can't even venture a guess. I just know that to me, I want to at least see what that is, because that historically did. Whether or not that's still the right thing to do, I'm not taking a position on that at all. But I think it's important that we consider that. The other part of it for me, and this is a deeper economics discussion, is the marginal cost of the next train and the marginal, the fact that we don't pay capital subsidies. I mean, this is all so far, I just understand, all we're doing is talking about operational subsidies. We're not talking about any capital subsidies. And that's even bigger if you think about what everybody's contributing to this process. So, I mean, there's a lot of pieces to that, but I know, given what we do, and Meg, you and I were talking about that the other day on a text message, but what is the capital budget? And typically jurisdictions, we do these capital things, but we don't charge the entities using those facilities the real cost of that capital. And so if you added that to it as a business person, look, I got to pay those capital costs as well as the operational costs. And so we're only including really one aspect of it. I'm not suggesting that we should do that, but I'm also saying costs are more than just what we're doing operations wise. And we have to at least be conscious of that, particularly if we want to do something more capital intensive that you can't get funding from other sources. That may be something that we would say we should invest going forward. Like you were talking about the reservoir that they were cash rich, but then they built the reservoir now. So I want to anticipate that stuff. I want to know that in 5 or 10 years, we're staying out of those curves and we're not beggaring ourselves, if you will. I want to make sure that we're really anticipating the future and have the funds and the support in place to do it.
Yeah, if I could just comment on that a little bit. I think on the capital side of the ledger, I think the jurisdictions are getting an amazing deal, because if you think about, right, the jurisdictional contribution that you all will give us next year is almost $20 million, 19.8. About $15 to $16 million of that will go into the operating budget. And the remaining $4 to $5 million will go into the capital budget, will serve as a local portion of our match to like the FTA grants that we have and things like that. And we'll go into the capital reserve, for projects that maybe we don't have grants for. But the purely jurisdictional contribution to our capital program is very, very low. So I think we have been successful at going out and getting smart scale money and I-66 money. We, I think, have used the FTA grants that we have pretty wisely. So I think the leveraging that you all are getting on the capital side is still working very well. It may not work forever, but at least right now it's working very well. I think it's on the operating side where it's broken down a bit from where it was before. And that's where we're going to have a little more of a tougher discussion about like, okay, well, are we going to be able to come up maybe through the SJ28 process with other money, or is the future of VRE going to require more from the jurisdictions? That's the part where I think the discussions are tougher.
But I add just a little bit more to that, because I really appreciate, we do have an opportunity right now as there's conversations with the SJ28, both Delegate Sickles and Senator Edmund are very keen on working towards a funding package for transit, and actually maybe a statewide, by the way. And so the key thing is that what are the asks if there is a funding package that's combination of statewide and regional other sources, is making sure the ask that's in there is reflecting the vision that that VRE has. The things that are being put in front of this, in addition to the great work that Mark and the team have in presenting sort of what's happening at VRE, is also an understanding that there is a gas tax. A good chunk of it, at least up in the MBTC, has already been pulled off to pay for WMATA. There have been some changes in the state aid that's being supported, but there's a really interesting opportunity as part of a bigger package. So it's not like a shining light just on VRE, but on transit funding in general, that can really get at, as he's saying, sort of a longer term operational sustainability that might be pennies compared to the asks, let's say, of another major, multimodal system that happens to be sort of based in the DC area. So there is an opportunity, and as Mark and Rich know, they want to know what's the ask. So this may not be a time to be shy about the ask. as they're looking at all these different revenue sources that potentially even could be statewide, so.
Yeah.
And we are meeting on Monday, like the next meeting is on Mondays, so. this is
If
prime
if I
time.
may ask, I may say, so. And for us in local jurisdictions, when we do our budgets, indeed, we don't, portion the capital, part to to any revenue. But actually, we do it in a more smart way. We do it through the debt service part, right? So because we actually pay for the capital one way or the other, but it's one chunk. It is then politics down how, who covers it, who doesn't. We have this, the taxpayer pays actually the debt service eventually. And we have our rules and budgetary goals that say up to which percent we can borrow, etc. Here we get a lot from where Kate said we get them from outside the system. And now we have all reasons in the world to be very apprehensive about that. But we may be looking at a few windows of opportunity. This is the moment to test.
So if I can put a pin in the fare increase one, I think it sounds like we should plan to head down that road as part of the budget process. We can land on a particular number a little bit later. We can also talk again about that relationship between the monthlies and the 10 trips and the base. But I think we have the direction there. Okay. On the jurisdictional contribution, as we've already been sort of talking about here, just to recap recently what's happened, I'm sure most of you remember, we had a pretty sizable increase as a part of the budget that we adopted for the coming year. So an 8% increase up to 19.8. And then prior to that had been some significant reductions during, the highest parts of the pandemic, which we were able to backfill with our pandemic relief. And then for the year that's ending now, we brought it back to that 2021 level, which was adopted prior to the pandemic. And then prior to the pandemic, again, in concert with our increases to the fares, we had sort of done every other year 3 to 4 to 5% increase. I think the cumulative changes, again, since 2009 are even more striking here. Only a 14% increase in sort of the total jurisdictional contribution, again, relative to just CPI inflation of 46%. If you look at the AAR, which is sort of an industry-specific measure of inflation, that's gone up by 67% in the period. And VRE's total operating expense has more than doubled in that period. So the amount of VRE's operating expense that's being covered by the jurisdictions has been on a pretty consistent downward trend. And so we have potentially two things that we're looking at here in the future, which we'll get to in just a minute. One is, how do we continue to operate what we have now? And then when Long Bridge is open and all the new capacity is there, will we have the resources to take advantage of it? So this is, from a process point of view, jurisdictional contribution, especially since we still have pandemic money. Like from a methodological thing, this is easier to change, as we go through the budget process. If we increase the jurisdictional contribution, that will use a little bit less of the pandemic money in 27. But I would like to open the floor back up to you guys and just get a little discussion.
That is the
here.
delta, between 111% increase in total operating expenses and the overall increase in subsidy. The key delta has been the the pandemic money, basically.
That, but also, we also get state operating assistance. We also get DPRA, assisting us with
They've gone up to a higher
track
degree
access
than-
fee. They have, as those track access fees have increased, they have maintained their same level of support. So that's been.
Having said that, at some point
that
the rate's been going so high, we'd love to work with you all, and I think make sure that the cost. And Rich has already, I believe, I want to talk about procurement with regard to the maintenance option, but at some point, getting that control's the word, from the freight railroads, so we can make sure those costs are aligned with what needs to be done is important to us.
And so part of it, I think for me and awareness purposes is someone is the fair amount, well, first off, the overall operational expense increases, and then where and how those graphs have changed, if you will. That trend line has changed over the last 5 or 6 years.
Absolutely, easy.
So that would be something that would help. It also allows us to present that to our colleagues or sell it to our colleagues as to what subsidy amounts are really buying more than they did in the past, because there's other forces that are also supporting the rail operations at the state level. That's changed as well. I guess
It's just for my edification. First of all, 67% by AAR. AAR, you said it's more of an industry specific inflation.
Yeah.
So our states.
American Association.
Okay.
I always get it backwards. Is it the American Association of Railroads or the Association of America?
The second thing, is
Yeah,
there
right.
any,
Thank you.
is there any rule of thumb or kind of a flag that when you look at operating expense, that you say, okay, we are now in a higher spending or in a lower spending? So is there any kind of a line where you say, oh, I'm above or I'm below? I mean, how do you evaluate that?
Sure.
I know a lot
I think-
is changing all the time, but.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can evaluate it. I think
Per passenger mile.
so yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. On a per passenger basis, I think VRE looks relatively expensive. But part of that is because passengers are taking very long trips. And so if you were to do it on a per passenger mile basis, I think VRE comes back down more into the normal kind of a range there. But that's the kind of thing that we could show you guys as well. And some of that increase is thing, and we've talked about this, is things like liability insurance, which is, out of our control and has like more than doubled at least in the last decade. It's become actually a pretty material part of our operating budget. And it is the kind of thing that we're trying to work with the Commuter Rail Coalition, trying to work on Capitol Hill, all these things, because that's not a sustained trend.
Because I think that part of our budget discussion should be also, to go back to Kate's remarks, also a list of things that are burdening our operating budgets and shouldn't. And we should talk to our legislators as well about, relieving us from certain obligations. So, and be able to quantify that. Maybe it's not so much money. Maybe it is though. I mean, I look forward to this discussion so that I can say, look, we are within, we are managing well. However, look, these are the burdens that we can avoid, and it's out of our focus.
Okay.
I'll just echo what you've all said. I think that to make a more informed decision, we have to have a little bit more data. But yeah, those numbers are, that's the real picture.
And the operating expense increase is, wow. I don't know what to make of that, other than that's what you share versus, and I know we're adding capabilities and capacities, and I assume that that's a key part of it, but understanding that in relation to the 67%, because that's something that we would want to at least understand in that and overall subsidy is increasing in the ridership per passenger.
So maybe you all went over this already and I missed it. Does these numbers include any increase in case the federal government just decide at some point in time, no subsidy. Therefore, any subsidies that they provide, is that calculated in
No,
the increases?
so it's, leave aside the pandemic money, which we're using in the operating budget, but generally, we don't get any direct operating contribution from the federal government. We do certainly get a lot of riders who get the transit benefits, so sort of, indirectly that money is coming to us. But most of the direct money that we get from the federal government is on the capital.
So, let me
By the program.
phrase the question a little bit different. Is this the increase based on the current way direct and indirect is calculated? Because if you say it's coming around indirectly, if you remove all the indirect, is it still straight up 8% increase, or would it be a little higher, 8.5, 9?
Oh, yeah, so there have, maybe this gets at your question. If the federal government's transit subsidy were to go away, for example, we would expect to see a reduction in ridership. And we did see that in the past, actually, when there was a period where the transit subsidy has normally been at parity with the parking subsidy. And there was a period where Congress dropped the transit one below the parking one. And we did see a drop in ridership during that period. And so if that were to go away, yes, our revenues would be significantly impacted. And in order to keep the same level of trains, we would need to have a much greater increase than this.
And so that's to my statement or comment. Would you consider having two numbers, like one that says this is if it continues with federal subsidies, and one without, just so that people would know, because it's not gonna be realistic. If you say 8%, I have to come back and something happened, federal government, and then you have to come back and say, well, by the way, now that, we have this instance. I don't know, it's just something I was thinking about.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any, we'll be back with you in July, so we don't need to have any specific direction now. But when we leave in July, I think if you can give us direction on at least what to bring as part of the September prelim, that would be great. Okay, so now into the other half of the discussion, the needs assessment for the SJ28 process. There's a lot of sort of work that I'm going to need to do with Andrew and with the rest of the team on the working group, because they're going to be integrating data from WMATA, from VRE, from OmniRide, and we all probably lay things out a little bit differently, sort of apples and oranges. We're going to have to figure out how do we make all of these things but that's more like a methodological kind of problem. Conceptually, I am thinking about 4 different sort of layers of needs that VRE has that we're going to want to lay out. One is, when the pandemic money goes away, what is sort of that structural deficit that will need to be covered just to maintain the trains that we have today? And I will say, the added ridership that we've had in this calendar year has pushed that sort of runway out a little bit further, but it doesn't change the sort of overall strategic picture. The second, which kind of goes with, again, like how do we keep going what we have, is we're looking in the mid-2030 timeframe about replacing our current fleet, which is 100 rail cars. That is please don't hold me to this, but that's probably $800 million to replace 100 rail cars by the time we get out, 10 years from now. Hard to say what a rail car is going to cost then, but let's just use something like that. And that is not, we purchased our existing rail cars. We did it through a combination of grants and debt. I suspect we would me, whoever will come to you with a plan that looks something like that. But you know, the idea that we're gonna go to a DRPT and say, hey, we need $800 million to replace our rail cars, and they're just gonna be like, oh, sure, here's a grant. Like, that's not gonna happen. Our existing FTA grants, given all of our EAM and FAM needs that we have, other projects that we have, we're not gonna be able to just lean on, you know, if those continue on at the level that they're at, we're not gonna be able to just lean on those. So that is a big need coming.
Just for my edification.
Yeah, of course.
Doesn't DRPT all involve, you know, funding agencies in that case? Don't they keep a track of recurring capital? I mean, you know, this is a depreciating stock, right? I can imagine that they should have somewhere when they grant an initial grant for that. They have to follow that because chances are that this will come back, right? So for their financial plan, do they?
What is it? TransAm, I think, is the database that they have.
Yeah, they do. They have an asset management. I think VRE's in a different part of the code than like if you're art, for example.
I understand,
buying stuff. Yeah.
But I just try to calibrate whether we are debating whether we surprise them with a huge ask or they actually have it already digested and ready for. I mean, they say, look, I expect VRE to be here. I mean, I know that because with buses, for example, we know that there is a certain expectation that we will be drawing capital money from time to time on that. Now, it's a different animal and it's also in smaller chunks. But there is a tracking of the depreciating asset, and there is a lifetime service time expectation, etc. And actually, I discovered that because when something happens, and for example, manufacturer goes bust and you cannot find replacement parts, and then you go earlier, and they know that your buses are younger than they should be, and so that's why I'm asking.
I don't mean to be blasé about this, but or too casual about it. They certainly know that it's coming. That doesn't mean that they have the money to.
That's okay, but this is something we can communicate already.
Oh, and we have a few years to communicate this. I mean, this is part of this process too. Is knowing, it's like a boa constrictor, right? Like this is a big bulge that is coming. A few years down the road. Sorry, that was a weird analogy. Sorry. Yep, I'm sorry. So then the third layer, and again, you all just today recommended this system plan to the commissions. I don't want to necessarily assume that they will approve it, but if they do approve it, then that next layer is the service expansion that we are contemplating after Long Bridge opens, after all these other capacity improvements are in place. And then the last sort of layer on the cake is the vision level, the long-term level. So this is how I'm conceptualizing it and intend to sort of present these things. But again, as we continue to refine them to the subcommittee. I had a version of this slide when we met previously, and I want to just reemphasize this. So projecting the expenses for the future is hard, but is doable. You make some assumptions about hourly costs, mileage costs, inflation, whatever. We're going to add this many trains. That's going to require us to grow staff by something, but less than that. I mean, we can get what I think are pretty decent expense numbers. It's the revenue numbers that I think are the more uncertain ones in this projection. And so I just want to talk. We are still looking at the pandemic relief money. We had said fiscal 28 before. Depending on how ridership does and things like that, now we're probably more like fiscal 29, but definitely still before 2030, that money's going to run out. The CROC is terrific at what it does in terms of us leveraging it for the debt that, that went into TRV. All of our modeling now, half of that will quote unquote come back to us after 2032, after we stop making those contributions to the Long Bridge project that we're giving to VPRA. So we'll be dropping, our projections drop that back into the model after 2032. We made the change a couple years ago, getting out of the merit program and into the sort of dedicated chunk of the MTF. Just to remind everyone again, that is not just for operations, that is for operations and our state capital match. It is not totally sufficient for that, but we'll talk about that another time. And I think more for the SJ28 process, it grows slowly. And it doesn't change if we add service like we're hoping to do. So this is part of the projection, but as we go out into the future, it becomes smaller in real terms, and it doesn't change at all as we change. So I just want us to keep that in mind. And then we've already talked about the local contribution. You guys have a lot of competing needs, and the idea that we're gonna add however many trains per day and put that all on the jurisdictions, we understand that that's not reasonable either. So the first bullet again just refers back to what we were talking about on the previous slide. These things are flat or declining in real terms, and relative to what we're hoping to do, they're shrinking. Passenger revenue is so challenging to project in the current environment. What is going to happen with federal government employment? What's going to happen with the Northern Virginia region growing in general? All of those are very important for sort of our existing weekday service and what we're projecting to add on the weekdays. And then for weekends, again, I think there is a lot of enthusiasm for it. I am excited that we will be able to roll it out, but doing ridership projections for that is just very tough because there's nothing really to base it on. So all of that is not to throw my hands up, but just to say there is a big sort of cone of uncertainty around that. And to go back up to the check mark that's above it, I don't anticipate, we're not modeling that we're going to be growing our fares like way above inflation, charging a lot more. We're just assuming that they're going to grow with inflation. And so if we want to see added passenger revenue in that model, it has to come from ridership, not from increasing, not from like big increases in fares. So, and then I already talked about the operating expense. I will say the one sort of bright spot in the projection is the new yard or the new midday storage facility at Seminary Yard. Once that is in place, that is actually an operating cost reduction relative to the trends that we're on now. So it's not all due. That's actually going to be great. I want to remind you of this chart that we talked about last time that came out of Nick and Christine's work with their consultant on the system plan. What we're doing for our analysis for SJ28 is taking the service assumptions that they have developed and putting them into our own financial model, which ends up giving, thankfully, very similar results to what they had with their financial consultant. Because which it should. You can make, they're a little bit different, but they are all pointing in the same direction. So again, just to remind you what this is showing, the red column on the left is, okay, in 2030, even if we don't add any service, the cost of our service is going to go up to $136 million. And we're going to have a gap, because the pandemic money will have run out, of $43 million that we have to cover from someplace. And then if you say, okay, rather than just run what we have, we go into the build and we run that post Long Bridge level of service. It's a 48% increase in expense, so going up to just over $200 million, but an almost doubling of the gap. Because all those other revenue sources are not growing at the same proportion. When we did our analysis, again, using the same increase in the service, we ended up with a slightly lower gap, but basically in the same realm. And so if we were to sort of layer this on here, and part of what we're gonna have to deal with methodologically with the working group is like, okay, what year do we wanna look at? Do we wanna look at 2035? You know, do we wanna look at a cumulative need over a period of 10 years? Like, we'll figure all that stuff out. So this may end up looking a little different later in the fall. I have chosen to look at the year 2035 as just a representative year out in the future. We're saying that just to run operating, what we will need another $36 million per year just to run the existing level of the service. Then this one's a little complicated, but if we were to finance that rolling stock purchase and not have any additional grant support out of it, we would be looking, and do that over a 30-year period, we would be looking at about $50 million a year in debt. I'm trying to make these things sort of comparable on an annual basis. Now, the hope, of course, would be that we wouldn't have to do it all with debt, that there would be grants, and that number would be low. But again, we're talking, you know, again, probably an $800 million or so replacement of the rolling stock. So then, in order then to do the 2030 service, and this is in 2035, but again, add that extra service that we want to add after Long Bridge, another, say, $37 million per year on top of that. So if I were to knock that $50 million number in the middle there down a bit because we got some grants, say it's in the $30 million range, you're talking between those three layers of the cake there, maybe $100 million. Please don't hold me to that number. We're going to refine these, but I want to give you guys a sense of like the scale here. I think that to me feels right. We would need roughly $100 million extra per year to run what we're still running, to support the replacement of the existing rolling stock. And remember, we can do the 2030 additional service with the rolling stock that we have. That's the really great thing. And I think Nick tried to remind you all of that. We're doing all the capital and the capacity stuff now, and then we'll be able to run a lot more service without having to add any more rail cars. We'll be using the rail cars that we have more effectively. So then, in order to do that 2030 level of service, it's really an operating ask. It's not a capital ask. So then you add those three together, and again, depending on how much we end up having to cover locally from the rolling stock, call it $100 to $110 million a year. And then, I'm sorry. And then I'm giving you a 2050 number for the 2050 service. And that's a huge additional ask on top of that. And I will tell you, just as me as the CFO, I am not expecting to try to get that green layer out of the SJ28 process. It's a long way in the future. If we can transform VRE with what we're doing in the orange level of service there successfully, I think we will be a very different organization than we are today. And that will be amazing, I think. To me, the green, just me speaking personally, hey, you can speak to the politics better, but to me, the green feels very speculative. That's a vision for the future. Whereas the red, the blue, and the orange, like the red and the blue are what we have to do to keep things going. And the orange is, well, this is why VPRA and VRE are doing all these investments, is to be able to add this extra service. So I didn't mean to get on my soapbox there for a second, sorry.
So the 36 million existing, that's over and above, that's existing through 2035. That's additional beyond. I want to make sure I understand.
Yeah.
you talk about 100 million overall. If you add those three together,
It's 123.
you're in that
Yeah,
range.
it's 120. I was assuming maybe
Yeah.
we get something.
No, and that's fine. But starting with the red, the existing, that's not existing revenue. It's not existing operations. That's the additional cost of future operations unchanged. You understand what I'm
Yes.
trying to?
In order to run what we are running today.
Yeah.
With a little, I shouldn't say today, with a little bit of weekends as well.
Yes, okay. That's 36 million.
We need, and it compares to this number here, the 43 million. When Nick and his team did it, they calculated a $43 million gap.
Okay.
Our number is a little bit different, but very much in the same range.
Okay.
We're calculating a $36 million. So we would need that much just in 2035. We would need that basically every year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, but this doesn't expand nothing, so from the politics of that, this is a stagnant system. I mean, this is a fiction of a stagnant system, because if service doesn't improve, you barely get anybody to be willing to continue funding that, right? So,
You said it in the very most negative way. I get that, but service is improving because we have Long Bridge, we have different other,
correct.
we have the siding that. But there's not additional trains. Is that your?
Imagine us having to explain to the taxpayer that we invested billions in the Long Bridge and the service is only marginally improved. We will have to say, yeah, we invested that, and this is now because the taxpayer is not going to see the Long Bridge as a marvel of modern infrastructure investment. They will see that as, where is my service?
The train's on time, more on time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that. I'm just saying that in my conversations with colleagues who were, when they saw this 93% arrow, said, are you crazy? I mean, is that, they misunderstood that. I mean, they said, okay, before it was like 31 or 32% is what we cannot cover, the gap. And then it's 40-something%, but for significantly better service, right?
Right, yes,
So
that's right.
that's the whole point. So actually, I got more engagement in the conversation about show me what significant better service means and how can we justify that. And because after all, I believe that politics, like in real life, it's the buck for the buck, the question, right? And of course, I agree fully with you that we have to make sure that we can pay for that. This is not an open conversation. I mean, I can figure out many configurations of bang for the buck that are kind of fictitious and not real. We have to be real first and then see that this is the work that we're doing right now. But I would say that I fully agree that our game right now is seeing how we stabilize the red and shoot for a good performance on the yellow orange.
So one thing that, I don't think you guys, because you're in Northern Virginia, are that much aware of. At our local planning meeting, all on transportation, known as FAMPO, when you look at our 2040, 2050 long-range plan, it basically shows that if the population grows like they're anticipating, you might as well be on scooters or bicycles in our area because you won't be able to move. And it might be the same in Northern Virginia. So I'm hoping that, people will want to really use the train more, and especially the weekend service, that it will be maxed out. And because people will have no other way to get to Nats game and the Commanders, wherever their stadium may be. And other places that they want to go to up north, museums, wherever. So, I mean, because I know right now you have no idea what those numbers are going to look like.
And that's it. In the right context with you all, I think we can that maybe the next time that we get together, whatever, I can show you some of the sensitivity of like, hey, what if the trains really were maxed out? And this was actually a question that came up at NVTC. Like, hey, well, how does it look if the trains are maxed out? And the numbers are much, much better. We're trying not to, pump super optimistic numbers into this too.
Sure.
But the numbers change, especially as you get more years out. The difference between, well, okay, what if ridership grows like 1% a year, and what if ridership were to grow 3% a year? By the time you get out to 2035, 2040, that actually makes a big difference. You're talking tens of millions of dollars in passenger revenue per year. So I'd be happy to, again, in a smaller group where I think we can walk through these things, I'm happy to talk through that with you all. In the bigger picture of like the SJ28 process, I think and you can tell me, Kate, I think we're sort of gonna have to come with a number.
Yeah.
Because, you know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
if you get into too much nuance about, well, maybe this trend or this trend, then you
But again, I think with that crowd, you can get this number, and this is gonna meet the vision of the plan, which has all these extra tracks, the new bridge. Like,
oh yeah, but I
the
don't.
crowd understands the vision of future operations of VRE. But indeed.
But I don't want to.
Like, so how much you need? Like,
Right,
are we solving for 5? Are we solving for 50? Are we solving for 500? That's.
But I don't want to.
Yeah.
By the same token, I don't want us to come to SJ28 with a really optimistic projection, and say we only need 50 million, and then it really is 100 million. I mean, that would be a
But they
disaster.
can also come at 500 million and then they laugh in your face. Again, like I get, like it's a very fine thing, but I think it behooves all of our systems. I mean, I know many of the bus systems around here, they're doing the same thing, is this is not the time to be like hyper conservative. This is what we can squeak by. They are asking for what the needs are. We need to tell. Let's tell them, because they're only gonna come back less.
Exactly.
Right? I mean,
yes,
let them be the ones to say, no, we can do 75% of that. But if we don't ask, collectively do not ask, they will not act upon that.
That's my philosophy. You don't ask, you don't get.
You don't ask, you don't get.
Gotta ask first.
I mean, I was always assuming that we are asking for the yellow.
Yeah, at a minute, yes. The first 3 levels we have to ask. I just wanted to say, if we don't, if politically the green is not able to be talked about right now, okay, fine. That's the work for a future board.
Other comments, questions, folks? You may have anything else you want to make sure they raised?
That's very.
For me, overall, it will be like, we all are doing our due diligence, and I understand we have to get to that. I would rather to see, when it comes to the prices, to see something more steady, like even if we have to do it. And I'm the new one here, so just keep it in mind. But something steady, maybe like, baseline of 3% every year on increases on the rides instead of doing the 5 or 6 or a bigger one. Every other year. So that is just my perspective. And then when it comes to, this, we do ask, for everything we need to ask, but with every budget, we have to figure it out where are the ways, whether it's technology or other ways for us to reduce our expenses I believe everybody's trying to make sure that we increase our ridership. If that increases and then the fair amount increases, is that already taken into consideration, or we are in the very conservative side with the numbers that you show?
What we're showing here is basically just the fares increasing with inflation, pretty much exactly what you said, yeah.
Last call, any other comments, questions? And Mark, do you think you got what you need for the next meeting, I guess is the.
Yes, so July's meeting, again, will be an informational version of some of what we've talked about here at the committee for the whole board to hear. Give a heads up on what, talk about what you all want us to bring in, because we won't meet in August. What to bring with the preliminary budget in September for fiscal 27, and then we'll be plowing ahead with the we will have had the SJ 28 meeting, we'll start plowing ahead with the needs part of it, so we'll give you another kind of an update on that. So yes, is the long way of saying that. I'm sorry, Dr. Young.
Just to make sure, I know Leslie is taking notes, so on the items that we've mentioned, like the percentage steady increase that Sonia just mentioned, are you taking those into consideration to present? Or those were just comments?
I think we will be, from what I'm hearing, we will very likely be presenting a preliminary budget for next year that includes an increase to the fares. And then I think then we can have a discussion about, do we prefer like a 3% every year? Do we prefer like a
Yeah, it's a good option.
6% every other year?
Yeah, I just
Like,
wanna
what's
make
the
sure.
best-
Yeah,
What's the best?
options, and then of course, if like, basically I forgot about the COVID money, the ARPA money, but the ARPA funds, federal, that's really what I meant. Federal funds in general, if that goes away, to what are our options on that also?
I'll have to think about that.
Huh?
I said I'll have to think about,
Okay. Just think
with the
about it.
pandemic money going away, we're definitely planning around that. We're doing the.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure.
Your other question about if the transit benefit money were to go away, I'll have to do some thinking on that.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted you to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you.
We're adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Let's go get that beach traffic there.
Yes, no, it's only 32 minutes right now. I looked.
That's why I keep rushing.
I was getting some answers.
Yeah, we like those things.
Yeah, I would have said.
What the heck, I see.